Pursuit Force is one of those games that if you've been playing games for, kind of a long time, it might remind you sort of those like late 80s sort of driving-based arcade games, the ones that were just sort of like, the APBs, the Outruns, that kind of stuff, where it was just all about kind of a weird sense of humor, really fast action, and kind of frustrating difficulty at times. Pursuit Force is kind of an amalgamation of those two styles of play, and sort of like, it kind of throws in some elements of like weird Saturday morning cartoon-esque like cop stuff, like Future Cops, like that old Saturday morning cartoon show, COPS Cops. Sort of like that mixed in with those gameplay styles, where you are this sort of nameless, handsome rookie cop guy that is part of this new crime task force for the Capital City Police Department called the Pursuit Force. The irony being that, well, you're it. You are the Pursuit Force. It's not so much a force as it is you. Basically, your job is to drive around the city, various environments, and jump on dudes' cars, shoot them in the face, take their car, go to another car, blow that car up, jump on the next car after that, then jump on a boat, shoot some more dudes, get to the end, and kind of make the chief not yell at you. That's pretty much the entire premise of the game. There's not a whole lot of story to it so much, but there is a fair amount of like narration and explanation of the different cases and stages by your angry chief, who, is like in grand sort of APB-esque form, just this really gruff guy who demands your badge whenever you fail a mission and, kind of says, hey, you remind me a lot of me whenever you do well, so, there's that. The gangs you go around fighting are just sort of these weird, cartoonish, villains. Like, there's a gang that is just like these hot chicks that apparently used to be stunt women, and now they're master thieves, so that's pretty great. There's the one that's like basically a bunch of mercenary commando guys, and they're led by a guy in a general's uniform. Sure, okay. So yeah, it is like a Saturday morning cartoon, except that people actually shoot each other instead of just kind of firing wildly, and sometimes stuff blows up. The action itself is actually really great, because it is like, it doesn't require a whole lot of thought on your part, though there is a certain amount of strategy to how the game plays. You start out pretty much all the missions just kind of in one car, and you're going along, and maybe you gotta rescue some civilians from some bad guys by blowing up those cars before they blow up the civilians, or maybe you just need to catch up with somebody, whatever. And then from there, it just kind of goes into this crazy battle sequence where you are either shooting guys from your car and blowing up their cars, or you get up behind them or in front of them, basically close enough to where you can press a button and jump onto their car, either the hood or the roof or whatever. And pretty much what happens from there is you just start shooting the guys in the car, and then you take over their car and just start driving. And it just kind of goes on like this, depending on the scenario. There are some variances. There are boss fights where, basically your entire goal is just to stay alive while crazy boss guys are shooting at you. There's some rail shooting missions from a helicopter. There's one where it's basically speed, but they call it velocity. So there's a decent variety of to the action, and it is basically set up like just a big, silly action movie. It's all about the crazy stunts. Sometimes you go into slow motion when you're jumping, and you can just like literally shoot guys while you're still in midair from one car to the next. That's pretty awesome. But at the same time, while there is quite a bit of variety to it, it does get a little repetitive in spots, because after you've kind of figured out, okay, well, I need to jump onto this car instead of shoot that car, and I don't need to jump on these cars or whatever, it does become a little bit routine. It's sort of like, okay, I know what I'm doing, I know where I need to go with this. It is a little bit predictable in spots. It's also really challenging, and sometimes that challenge is a little bit cheap. There are times where you feel like you're just getting completely ganged up on, there's no way you can beat this mission, and then eventually you do beat it, but it takes like 9 tries or whatever to get through it, and you might be kind of fed up with it by that point. But for the most part, the challenge is really good. It's not an easy game, and you feel satisfied when you've beaten it. And again, it is a lot of fun just to kind of jump around these cars, do these crazy action stunts and what have you. Most of the main missions are in the career mode, which kind of goes on 6 missions apiece for the 5 different gangs, so that takes a little while to get through. And you will probably want to go back and play some of the missions over again, just because there's stuff to unlock, and you get better grades, better point scores, etc. But beyond that, there's not an awful lot to Pursuit Force. There's sort of a race mode where you kind of get these arbitrary scenarios, and basically you start at the back and you just try to win the race. Not really that exciting. And there's some time trial missions which are fun in the way that pretty much any other time trial mission is kind of fun, So it's not really all that different than what you would expect from that kind of, those sort of like ancillary modes to a driving game. And there's no multiplayer of any kind, which is really a bummer, because picture this. So, you know, you're driving along, you're racing against your buddies, and you can, like, you know, jump on their cars and try to shoot them and take over their cars, and then they have to start back later. You know, maybe they don't die out of the race altogether. Maybe they, you know, then they can, like, blow up your car, and then they can rush past you. That would be fun, but you can't do that in this game, unfortunately. There's no multiplayer of any kind. That's a bummer. Pursuit Force definitely has the production values, though. The graphics are pretty awesome. Aesthetically, you know, it's just kind of Saturday morning cartoon cop stuff. It's not, you know, too original, too amazing, but the technology behind the game is actually really impressive. Like, the game runs at an amazing clip. The sense of speed, especially in the faster cars, is really good. The physics, for the most part, hold up. Little glitches here and there, but for the most part, you know, crazy explosions, cars that just kind of veer wildly, you know, what you would expect from an arcade driving game. And the animations are just awesome. Like, there's something just about the way the character animations, like, look and move. Like, it's just so exaggerated and so over the top. You know, Guy doesn't just jump on car. Guy goes flinging himself to the car while shooting guys. You know, he, like, dangles off the edge, feet dragging. You know, when he wants to get into the driver's seat, he loops back around and drop kicks the dead body of the driver out the driver's side to get in. You know, it's just that kind of, like, just ludicrosity is really what makes the whole thing feel like that kind of action movie thing that it's going for. Above all else, though, Pursuit Force succeeds because it actually feels like a handheld game on the PSP. It's not just some console game that, you know, some publisher decided just to kind of squeeze on there as tightly as they could and, you know, insert awful loading times and all that, you know, kind of nonsense. It kind of makes some of those PSP games not as much fun to play. Pursuit Force, it's a brisk game. It plays quickly. You can play it in long bursts if you want, but you can also just sit there and play it for 5 minutes at a time. It feels designed for the PSP, and the gameplay mechanics are more than fun enough to make it worth your while.